The NFL is a league filled with characters, some of which are so ridiculous that if you saw them in a film you'd lament the director for their detachment from reality. That is the nature of the beast with some professional athletes though. They are so specialized from a young age and in many ways coddled. As a result, certain skill sets don't always develop in the same way that it does for us regular Joes. And thus we have some wild personalities like Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., and Baker Mayfield, all of who can't seem to go a day without ending up in the news for one thing or another. But to be fair to those guys, they are bona fide stars in the NFL and the spotlight often ends up on them whether they like it or not. It just so happens they don't always make the right decisions or say the right things when it is on them. It isn't just the stars in the NFL that struggle with making good decisions though. It just takes more dramatic transgressions for lesser players to make the news. And that, my friends, is exactly what happened with Barret Robbins, the former Oakland Raiders center who had one of the most ironically unforgettable incidents in NFL history during the lead up to Super Bowl 37 back in 2002. Up to that point, Robbins had a solid reputation around the league. He was a second-round pick out of Texas Christian University in 1995, and after sitting most of his rookie season, he quickly developed into a solid center for Oakland when he replaced the longtime starter Dan Turk the following year. During the beginning of his career, he flew under the radar, as much as a 6'5" behemoth of a man could at least. But even around the facilities, he was good-natured and liked by his teammates. His friends around the league always said that the center had a kindness about him. He truly cares about other people, explained Drew Pittman, his former agent. He would give anyone the shirt off his back. He's unselfish to a fault with himself, with his finances, with everything. That's just the kind of guy Robbins was, and as time went on, he continued to improve on the field and began taking on a bigger role within the team. And as Robbins stepped up his game, so did the Raiders' offense. During the 2000 season, with a young John Gruden at the helm and veteran Rich Gannon playing quarterback, the offense really started to flourish, finishing with the third best scoring in offense in the league, averaging 29.9 points per game. The team made it to the AFC Championship game against the Baltimore Ravens, which they would lose 16-3. The Raiders' lackluster offense performance shocked everyone, and it was the big story coming out of Championship Sunday. But surely if the incident that took place during the week leading up to the game had leaked, it would have made some serious waves in the media. Apparently, Robbins went AWOL during the week leading up to the AFC Championship, but because he resurfaced within 24 hours and thanks to the Wild Wild West way in which the Raiders operated at the time, the incident was swept under the rug. Hindsight is 20/20, but you have to assume that the Raiders management team wanted that one back, but we will get to that later. Anyways, even with a disappointing loss in the AFC Championship, the Raiders were still a popular Super Bowl pick heading into the 2001 season. Oakland got off to an excellent 6-1 start, but faltered as the season went on, in part due to inconsistent performances from the offense. They lost 4 of their last 6 games to finish 10-6, 2 games worse than their 12-4 mark from the previous season. A huge part of the problem was the season-ending injury that Robbins suffered, as he only played in 2 games the whole season, and the potent Raiders offense averaged a full 5 points less per game. So heading to the 2002 season, the team was excited to have the anchor of its offense line back. Not only would Robbins' impact on the field be beneficial, but he would also offer some much-needed continuity following Gruden's departure. Through the regular season, everything was going according to plan. The Raiders finished with the second-best offense in the entire NFL and locked down the AFC West title, posting an 11-5 record. It wasn't just the numbers that made this offense so scary either. Oakland had legitimate star power, future Hall of Famers like Tim Brown and Jerry Rice, and of course the league MVP from that season, Rich Gannon, at quarterback. And behind the scenes of all that playmaking prowess, there was an offensive line that was considered to be by many the best in the NFL, and that unit was led by Barret Robbins at center. Needless to say, expectations were sky high headed into the postseason. Oakland got off to a great start in the playoffs too. They dispatched the New York Jets in the divisional round and then the Tennessee Titans in the AFC Championship game, slotting them for an epic matchup in the Super Bowl against former head coach John Gruden's new team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Little did the Raiders know they had more trouble brewing right inside their own building. Barret Robbins was having what he now recognizes to be a manic episode, and one that he believes lasted more than 2 weeks. But at the time, his teammates didn't suspect anything was up with the center. I mean, he was playing great ball. Robbins himself had acknowledged that he was struggling with depression during the previous season. This was following a mental health-related hospitalization that occurred in a team hotel years ago during his second season with Oakland in '96 before a game against the Denver Broncos. But Robbins had become a master of masking his mental health issues. Plus, with all the turnover on NFL rosters, there simply weren't that many of the same players from that 1996 team still on the Raiders. How could his teammates know something was up? After the incident, when questioned, Callahan explained, "There was no indication of stress. We all have stress. I don't know to what degree he handled it. He seemed to handle it very positively in the past." Robbins did have that little disappearing act from a couple of years back on his resume, but he was building up a little bit of a reputation as a partier, so the fact that he was missing on the Saturday morning before the Super Bowl didn't really hit home at first. It was strange though. He had made it to the team hotel on Friday with plenty of time to make the team's 11 p.m. curfew, and both his driver and his wife, Marissa, accompanied him there. So no one suspected he had any intentions to do anything other than go to sleep, wake up, and head to the team meeting the following morning. But Saturday rolled around and Barret Robbins was nowhere to be found. Robbins failed to report a mandatory 9 a.m. meeting Saturday.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday.
He missed the offensive line meeting later that morning, and then he was not on a new bus that took the team from the hotel to its practice facility for a 1 p.m. walkthrough. As the hours continued to pass and the Star Center remained a ghost, team officials and Robbins' teammates started to get worried. Where in the world was their Pro Bowl center and why was he not answering phone calls? Finally, in an act of desperation, a Raiders staffer called Marissa Robbins and bluntly asked, "Where's our guy?" Panic started to set in once they realized that even his wife didn't have the faintest idea where the center had gone. Then at 8 p.m. on the Saturday night before the Super Bowl, Robbins reappeared at the team hotel.
"Ralph, I thought you were dead." "Nope."
This should have allowed the coaches to breathe a huge sigh of relief. The plan was to punish Robbins by benching him from the start of the game, but then let him play after the first drive. He was that important to their offense. But soon, Robbins showed he was in no state to play football, and any sense of peace that had accumulated had suddenly dissipated just as quickly as it had appeared. It was bad enough that apparently Robbins didn't even recognize his head coach, and despite all of this, Raiders owner Al Davis still wanted him to play. He had one of the assistant coaches, Willie Brown, take Robbins out to the parking lot the morning of the game to have him run through some sprints and drills, but it was unavoidable. There was no shot that Robbins could play. It was so bad that head coach Bill Callahan took him off the roster and sent him off to the hotel where his family was staying. Callahan recognized something was seriously wrong and wanted to send him on a flight home, but the disoriented Robbins didn't have his wallet or any identification with him, so a flight was out of the question. On Monday morning when he started to come to, he was in his family's hotel room watching TV when his wife Marissa came in and told him it was Sunday, and asked if he knew where he was supposed to be. "Church," he had responded, further explaining that he thought they had already won the Super Bowl. Spoiler alert, they had not.
I was completely living in a fantasy world. In my mind, we had already won the Super Bowl, and we were celebrating. That's how delusional I was.
And without their star center, the Raiders would not win the Super Bowl, as Gruden and his Buccaneers easily handled Oakland, winning by a final score of 48-21. Coach Callahan tried to downplay the impact of Robbins' absence, but it is hard to imagine that he really believed that. In the days that followed the Super Bowl, more and more questions were raised about what had happened. Where did Barret Robbins go and why?
John, what about the change at center? What's going to happen with True replacing Robbins here?
You know, Adam True's not as stiff. He's a good player. He's not as big or as strong as Robbins, but he's quicker.
To answer the former, it would soon come out that he had made a beeline for Tijuana, Mexico. Apparently, he had stopped taking his antidepressants and opted in favor of some self-medication, causing him to go off the rails. He spent hours drinking tequila shots and beer at one of the local watering holes, according to a Bay Area man who said he was with Robbins in Tijuana. As the facts continued to come out, it started to get much darker. One of the men in Robbins' group that accompanied him on the trip explained that during the journey, they feared Robbins was suicidal. Here's what the man, Carter Deese, told the San Francisco Chronicle the following week. Robbins would be happy one minute and then the next he was crying and talking about how much all that Super Bowl stuff was getting to him. Fortunately, Marissa recognized the magnitude of the situation and had Barrett checked into a rehab facility shortly after the incident. Perhaps at home he had exhibited more signs that would have suggested he was capable of such a breakdown. Back in Oakland, his teammates and coaches were still in shock. Some were angry, like his fellow offensive lineman Frank Middleton, who put it succinctly, "If Barret Robbins comes back next season, I won't. I want to play with people I can rely on. I don't want to go into next year worrying about some cat making it to the game. We're family. When crunch time comes and one of your family members doesn't come through, it hurts." Some were supportive, like Coach Bill Callahan, who, when asked if Robbins was still a Raider, replied by saying, "Right now, absolutely." Callahan continued to explain that Barrett's return next season was viable, dependent on where he was at mentally. But most were just downright confused and frustrated. Unfortunately for Robbins, his troubles were far from over. Although he did make the team and played the following year, the Raiders were terrible, finishing 4-12. Then when the season closed, he and several other teammates were named in the BALCO report, and his time in the NFL was over. In retirement, as I'll call it, Robbins faced numerous run-ins with the law. He continued to struggle both with addiction and depression, blowing through all of his NFL money in the process. Mental illness is a serious thing, and we can see from this report that perhaps he does have some serious problems, especially since people outside of the team noticed it, and we give the Raiders credit for being supportive of him. We do hope that he gets the help he needs and is able to live, eventually, a healthy and fulfilling life. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do so by clicking the subscribe button down below. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TPS for more cool videos every single day. We'll see you next time.